the Pawnee Seed Preservation Project, presentations by me, but there are two of us that really head that up. Deb Echohawk of the Pawnee Nation in Pawnee, Oklahoma, and myself here in Nebraska. And I'm just going to let these slides walk me through everything. Here we go. So start out by showing you the Plains Tribes region in the United States. And you can see the Pawnee is the main tribe focused on in the central Nebraska. There are some other tribes that could come in there to the west and east, but really the Pawnee were the main tribe in this area, central and south central, and a little bit of north central, and going down into Kansas, also north central Kansas. So the ecology of the plains is very important to the tribes that were in this area, the buffalo, because of the grasses here, all of the waters, all of the rivers, and of course their traditional crops that were here for hundreds, if not 1,000 years, are very important to them. And therefore this region is very important because that's where everything is successful, the most successful. I have on here a Pawnee Earth Lodge photo taken during the time that the Pawnee were still in this area. They lived in earth lodges. And then at the bottom of this slide, I have a picture of a street in Pawnee, Oklahoma on their tribal grounds today. A lot of stone buildings. That's pretty much the way their streets look in their area where they were moved in the 1870s. Okay, so treaties are important to this because it shows how the lands were given over by the tribes, and they had a huge impact on the tribes and what would eventually happen to them. So you can see there were 4 treaties with lands ceded by the Pawnee Nation in Nebraska. And in 1875, you see the little, what is now Nance County, that was the Pawnee Reservation that they were put on in 1875 before their removal at about that same time. They were put there, I think 57 was when they were, if I'm not, that could be wrong, but I'm thinking that's when they were put there. So as these lands were given away through treaties, they have less and less area for hunting, less and less area for growing, and just using the grasslands. So it has a big impact on their lives. So this story really does begin at the Archway in Kearney. I was at the Archway for almost 14 years, from the time it opened until December of 2013. So when you look at this picture, I can put my little arrow on here, you go across and over the way over in here is where the Pawnee Gardens were that we had when we started working with the Pawnee. When the Archway opened, one of the first things that started happening as a manager, people would ask to talk to the manager from time to time, and they would be tribal people, and they would say, you're doing a fantastic job of telling the history of all of these transportation routes and a lot of history, but you act like the history began with the Oregon Trail and you're missing about 1,000 years. And it would be great if you added more things to do with the people who were here, the indigenous that were here, and with the part that we played. And I listened to that and decided in 2003 it was time to start a program. And I had 4th grade teachers also asking me to start programs, a program about Native Americans. A lot of 4th grade teachers I discovered through our programming at the Archway are afraid to teach more than exactly what is written in their books because they don't want to offend, they don't want to get anything wrong, therefore they stick to exactly what's in the book. I think that was a respectful way for them to try to approach it. Of course, some have done more research and things and they have been able to do more. So I decided if I was going to do that, it would make sense to start a program about the Pawnee. We're in their homeland in central Nebraska. And if I was going to do that, I wanted the Pawnee to help me create that program instead of reading books that some white man wrote literally 100 years ago. Most history books 100 years ago were written by white males. and I wanted them to help me tell about their culture. And I really wanted gardening to be a part of it because I have always gardened my whole life. Grew up on a corn farm. Didn't ever want to grow corn again after I left the farm. But in reading about them, the couple of books that people really suggested I read, I knew that they had a lot of varieties of corn, and I knew that corn was very sacred to them, more than any other crop. So I thought if they would be willing to let us put in a corn garden, I would like to do that. So in November of 2003, I make that phone call and called down to Oklahoma. I didn't even know where the Pawnee were. I had to look it up to find out that they were in Oklahoma now. So I called the tribe. I wound up having to call 3 times because when I mentioned I wanted to start a program and I wanted gardening as part of it, they didn't even know who to have me talk to. And finally, on the 3rd phone call, I think they realized I wasn't going away very easily, and they put me through to their education director, Deb Echohawk, who is now my counterpart and the person I work under in the tribe with the Pawnee Seed Preservation Project. And I realize that this presentation is maybe very different than the presentations you're used to, talking about purely nature and things, but it's all a big part of it. With our nature in Nebraska, our ecology is huge to this. So after an hour of conversation, I don't know, we just clicked. Deb and I really clicked, and she asked me, I asked her if she had anything we could try to put in a garden. She said, I only know of 2 corn varieties left. I have 50 seeds of one and a mayonnaise jar of another. And that's all that remains of all of ours that I know of. And she said that if I talk to our culture committee and they're willing to share our seeds, because the Pawnee never shared their seeds. They're so sacred to them. You know, they would never dream of giving them away. If I can get the culture committee to agree to it, would you be willing to try to grow our corn back up in our homeland of Nebraska? Because I told her that makes sense to me. It's going to do best in its homeland, like all other plants do, you know, put it where it's from. So she did get permission to send some seeds up. So let me tell you, when I hung up for that phone call, I was so excited, but at the same time I was terrified. I thought, what did I just commit myself to? She has a handful of this one and a mayonnaise jar of that one, and what if I don't succeed? But the story, as the story goes, and you'll see, we've been successful, which is wonderful. I love the way Pawnee corn was planted, and it's still the way I plant it today, and it's the way the Pawnee plant it today yet. It was planted in hills, a man's footstep apart from each other in no particular direction, with 5 seeds to a hill, 4 in the semi-cardinal directions, and 1 in the center. An even number of hills was, you can see I was in a hurry doing this, planted per variety. Okay, so always an even number of hills. And as we get to more and more hills, it's kind of fun trying to count all those hills to make sure you have an even number. Why were they in an even number? Because they were matriarchal. The women were the farmers. Men did not grow any the crops. The women did it. And women, all females, have an even number of breasts in all creatures. So even number of hills, matriarchal. Every time in the spring, a 7-day ceremony preceded the planting, 24 hours a day for 7 days around the clock. That's a whole different level of relationship to corn than I grew up with. I thought, you know, and I thought we had a close relationship with the land and with the crops. So after 3 years of growing, we finally got to meet. So this was in 2006, and Facebook didn't exist yet. So we didn't have any idea what we looked like until the day we met. So it was really cool to have Deb come up from Oklahoma to get the harvest that year. And the first article was written when she came up. The interview was done for Nebraska Land magazine. It didn't come out until 9 months later, but the interview happened while she was up here. So right away, I mean, the reason she came up, actually Nebraska Land helped fund getting her up here, which was great. So the stories began as soon as they came. Deb and Carla Knife Chief, the 2 women, came up that first time. So, and that's an important part of this, is telling our story. the press has done a lot for us, really. Deb wanted me to put this on here. This is a picture that I found these little pumpkins that had corn in them at Hobby Lobby or somewhere. So I painted them in 2010 with all of the 6 different varieties we had worked with at that time. So as time went by and we became successful and we were able to get harvests, not every variety, some failed some years, but we were able to start working and being successful sending seeds back down to Oklahoma. More families trusted us and began to open once every 3 years or so, a sacred bundle made from a hide is opened in the family. And they would pull some seeds out of these sacred bundles and send them up. They would bless them. We're still having a blessing ceremony. They started a blessing ceremony again, which was 48 hours around the clock, not 7 days. So the seeds are blessed every spring in Oklahoma by the seed blesser. Everyone that I started getting other volunteers to grow for me because I can't grow that many. I don't have enough room. And everyone that is a grower for us agrees that every single seed they harvest goes back to Oklahoma. They're not ours. They belong to the Pawnee Nation. So everything goes back down and they bless them the next spring. And according to what we think we want in our gardens, they send up the seeds in the spring. So these are just some pictures that were taken during the Archway years. Deb and I on the left there outside of a garden, once we figured out to plant sunflowers around the edge because the sunflowers really protect from wind and disease. These old ancient varieties are much more susceptible to our winds in Nebraska, and that's what they were doing. We discovered when it was documented in the early 1900s, that's what they were doing, was planting sunflowers around, or sometimes even planting in ravines to keep the winds from breaking the corn. In the center is the very first corn that I worked with, one of those handfuls sent up. That's eagle corn, and you can see in the center of each cream-colored kernel are the spread wings of a flying eagle in a deep purple. That's absolutely beautiful, just a beautiful corn. And on the right, I can't see it under all the people, but that's one of our interns. We started having interns about that time, and that's Electa Redcorn, and you'll be hearing about her again, but she came up to be an intern one summer. So if you can imagine living in Oklahoma, it's not corn country, which is why the crops had such a hard time there and started to fail. When the interns first came, they didn't know where the corn would get an ear or what a tassel was or what a silk was. They knew nothing about the corn and the plants. So, trying to get people in their tribe to understand, because the goal has always been to get corn back, and for the Pawnee should be growing their own corn, right? Instead of us. So here's your corn. It was a big part of their culture for the women, especially the tilling of the soil and the working of the soil and the land and the harvest, hands-on, which, as we know, working in nature is very hands-on. So that was the whole goal from the very beginning, was for it to be very hands-on for the Pawnee. So we found sponsors to sponsor these interns to come up. Some of this, you have to realize I did this for a Kearney group that when I made this PowerPoint, so you're going to see a lot of things in here. But this is about people. It's not just about nature. It's about the people and their connections. So I started powwows when I was at the Archway. Maybe one of you actually went to one. This is the only ad I still could find a copy of, and it was in 2010. The first one was in 2009 when invited the Pawnee to come back to Nebraska. A long story short, in a matter of 2 months, we went from 16 people that were going to come, and 155 Pawnee came back for that return to their homeland. At Kearney, and I had a lot of people help us raise money in the Kearney area because we brought them back at no cost to them. It was pretty amazing. It's pretty neat. Okay, so in the Archway years then, from 2003 to the end of 2013 when I was there, we had 2 Pawnee gardens. The one that's in the top there, that's the biggest garden. And we had annual interns and volunteers helping us all of the time. The Pawnee and Arikara tribes came together and built an earth lodge on our grounds. They were all part of the Pawnee tribe at one time, and then half broke away about 300 or 400 years ago and became the Arikara. They were such a big tribe, half broke off. School programs and all kinds of groups came out and were in our earthworms harvesting and touring the gardens. It was just really wonderful. And then put on 4 cultural powwows in 4 years. All 4 tribes that were removed from Nebraska for one reason or another came back to dance on their homeland. I didn't realize until we started putting these on that another tribe in Nebraska would not invite another tribe to come back and dance on their powwow grounds because that's their sacred grounds. I didn't even know that. So after the first powwow when the Pawnee came, I had a tribal member from the Omaha call me and say, you know, there are other tribes that really would like to have that same type of healing coming back to their homeland to dance. I do believe that the Omaha now have invited the Pawnee, so they're starting to do that now, which is great. But at that time, that wasn't happening. So our gardening successes from that time, we had 9 volunteer gardeners across Nebraska join the project. In 2010, the Pawnee eat eagle corn for the first time, they figure, in 125 years. It was the first time they ate their corn again, and for a ceremony. And the garden seeds began to be checked out of a seed bank to the Pawnee gardeners in Oklahoma. So now in Oklahoma, the Pawnee are doing what we wanted from the beginning. They're starting to actually work with their seeds. They don't grow that well in Oklahoma, but they can still grow it, harvest it, and cook with it. It wouldn't be very good for seed again. We are growing corn, beans, squash, watermelons, and pumpkins at this time, all Pawnee tribal seeds that have come forward over the years, and some from other tribes that are their relatives, like the Arikara and the Wichita. Okay, so we're starting really expanding in that time. Then in 2014, I became an instructor at Central Community College teaching in the hospitality department, which I was in for 32 years before I went there. And we start to develop all of these educational relationships that just become really wonderful for us. Oklahoma State University has been tremendous helping us with documenting and understanding the seeds. There's a professor from Langston University that does all kinds of workshops for the Pawnee, because when I first met Deb, she was the only gardener she knew of in her tribe that she knew about. And so there's a lot to learn. When we don't understand ag at all, or growing at all, they had a lot to learn. And they have workshops all the time now. Pawnee Nation College now works with us. They send interns up every summer from Pawnee Nation College to help with the crops up here and their learning, which is wonderful. UNL has been fantastic to work with, and you'll hear about that again down the road a little bit. And Central Community College letting us use the land there to put new gardens in, and I've put on workshops there. We've invited the Pawnee up, we've invited other tribes. It's wonderful partnerships to help. So the gardens and interns at Central Community College at our Hastings campus have been coming since 2017. Every summer they help plant. Right there, they're putting manure on that, got some compost on that garden. The nice thing about having Central Community College campus is we have summer housing for them. The college lets us use housing. They provide housing at no cost to the tribe, which is wonderful, because the tribe economically struggles, and an excellent meal plan. So it's very reasonable for us to bring these interns up to continue to teach the Pawnee young ones more and more about working with their crops where they're most successful here. And those 3 interns were the 3 that were here in 2017. There they are in a picture with me there, standing together. That first summer that they were at the college. So in 17 years that we've been working with this, we've had 52 Pawnee interns now. So 52 young people getting involved and learning about Pawnee corn and other crops and how it all works. It's wonderful. 2 people have been very important to this along the way, and we didn't contact them, they contacted us, which is wonderful. Heather Henson on the left is the daughter of Jim Henson that started the Muppets. She reached out to us when she was in Kearney doing a play. She does puppetry also. and came to see me at the college and visited for about an hour. And by the time it was done, she said, you know, I remember you from the archway. I was out there one weekend and you were working in the gardens, and I want to support more interns. I want to bring more people and support what the work is that you are doing. So she's been wonderful every summer, because, you know, as tribal people that need income, a struggling tribe, they get paid. These internships are paid, which is huge because the tribe would not be able to do that. So the other person is Natalie Hahn. Natalie Hahn just received the Solar Award from Humanities this year. She worked for the United Nations, for UNICEF in Africa and Rome, and worked with tribal people and introduced crops there. She introduced soy, actually, and saved a lot of lives from babies dying, giving them soy milk because they were malnourished. And Natalie, let me tell you, she's a force to reckon with. And she has really built our relationship with UNL. She went to UNL, she's taken me down to UNL, and she said, look, this is what you need to be doing at UNL. And so she's been pretty awesome. And she's always calling me and telling me I need to do something else. So she's just wonderful and has a lot of connections. So going back to these interns, Kahita turns out to be a very important one. And Kahita was named after one of her ancestors that walked from Nebraska to Oklahoma in the 1870s. Kahita is now at UNL. She's the first person in the Pawnee Nation to start working on her master's degree in ag. First person ever. So that's pretty huge. So she's been coming for 4 years now. You can see she's working on documentation forms. We are documenting every variety thoroughly so that we can start to protect these varieties for the Pawnee so that they will be registered as theirs. And the other person is Electa, and I said I'd come back to her. It's really cool. On September 30th of this year, the Pawnee tribe started an ag department, and Electa is heading up the ag department. She's just finishing up her doctorate in policy. So remember when I started 17 years ago, Deb was the only person she even knew of that had a garden, and now the Pawnee Nation is starting an ag department. So that's, I mean, it's taken time, but it's pretty cool. Another thing that happened for the people, I brought the Pawnee back to the college in 2018 and put on an event called Honoring Nebraska's First Farmers. So I had other tribes from Nebraska also represented at that. Scott, were you at that?
I was at that, yes.
I thought so, that's right. So that was really nice to be able to do in the spring of 2018. Put on a workshop there too that was really good for the other tribes in Nebraska that might be interested. Deb and I decided somewhere along the way, why are we learning all of this from the corn? The corn has taught us, but not helping other people. We need to, you know, other people are likely in the same position, maybe struggling with their corn, and, you know, why aren't we helping them? So this event was to reach out to the Nebraska tribes, but we've reached out to other tribes since then also. And this was a picture taken at that event of most of our gardeners from that year. Have 17, we have about 17 every year across Nebraska. Try to spread them out so we don't get hit by the same storms. And you know, the main thing every gardener has to do is commit that every single seed they grow goes back to the Pawnee. We don't keep anything, it belongs to them. So, and believe it or not, that's kind of a hard one for some people. So this is my favorite picture. This was taken by the Hastings Tribune, Deb and I having a good laugh in a corn garden. This was actually the picture of the photo of the year for the Nebraska Press Association in 2018, which is pretty cool. Deb hates this picture because she thinks she's laughing like a hyena. I love it. I think it's fantastic. So, but as of 2019, then last year, we had brought back 16 varieties in 16 years. So we brought back every variety of corn that the Pawnee had, and we started with 2. So we've learned from the corn how to do this. Nobody's been able to tell us, but we started seeing other colors showing up, and then we went back to documentation and discovered that those other colors showing up were actually other varieties of Pawnee corn that were documented by Will and Hyde, and you'll see that the cover of their book. They were documenting all the tribes' seeds in the early 1900s that they could get a hold of because they were trying to sell them. They wanted to make money from them. So we've brought back 16 of those now. And this is kind of the year by year, all as different varieties came forward. You can see some years, like in 2017, some of it failed. You know, sometimes we just weren't able to get it to go for a while. When sometimes we're talking about just a hand, you know, hardly any seeds at all. So it's taken a long time, but in 17 years is a long time. But when you look at it, you know, we've had really good success. In 2021, we're still trying to get another one to come back looking good. So this is my favorite slide. It took me over half a day to put this slide together one day. Just going around all over and finding pictures. These are pictures of 13 of the 16 varieties that we've brought back to date. And you can see they're all very different from each other. And some of them are in different phases of coming back than others. But these were all pure, true Pawnee varieties. And the neat thing about Pawnee corn is that as other varieties, colors start showing up, they never traded, they never mixed their corn with anything else. So everything that is showing up is a pure Pawnee variety. So it's really cool. And I don't think there's probably any type of a comeback like this in the United States, where all of these true varieties are back, because they just never mixed them with anybody else's corn, which is pretty cool. So we've discovered corn families as we go along and just watching things. So blue flower corn, red flower corn, and mixed with actually that started with mother corn in the center is like the purest first Pawnee corn. And then the speckled corn varieties came. And then from those, they kept keeping colors that got darker and darker and darker. And then they get to red and blue flower. That's, we're discovering the process that they used even to develop new varieties from their ancient ones over years, which is pretty cool. This is a map from 2019. I don't have 2020 done, but this is a map of Nebraska that shows where the gardeners were in 2019. So over here's Kearney, right here's Kearney. So you can see we go up north. Here's the Loup Rivers. Anytime we can get a gardener up on the Loup, we're pretty happy, because that's where the Pawnee really lived, and the crops just do so well up there. Kearney, because we started there, still has quite a few gardens going. Gene Hunt at Fort Kearney is amazing. But once again, just trying to follow, you know, looking for areas where the Pawnee might have been, where that soil is going to be conducive to the corn growing. So there's a map of the state showing where gardeners are. I love this picture of Deb from this year too. So in 2020, we had 20 gardens in Nebraska, 17 different gardeners with 20 gardens. And in Oklahoma, down in Pawnee, they had 14 seed checkouts. So they keep a seed bank, and anybody that wants to grow can check out seeds and grow. And they've had their most so far ever in 2020, with 14 people checking out seeds, learning how to grow Pawnee corn. Pretty cool. So Pawnee corn is medicine. When we think of the corn today, really has a bad reputation for not being good for you, being full of starch. Pawnee corn and probably every other tribal corn that is out there is not like that at all. They're very high in protein, very low in carbs, and high in antioxidants. The darker the color, the higher it is, and very medicinal. The Pawnee will give a blue corn mush to people that are so sick they should be going in the hospital, or maybe are. The hospital will let them, and they usually do down there, and they recover so fast. And it's important to recognize that when they ate the same thing, they ate corn 365 days a year. Corn and buffalo, staple food. That's a staple food if you eat it every day. Their bodies adapted to that so well that even today, after their ancestors had it for thousands of years, diabetes is rampant in the tribes. But if they start feeding their traditional foods to their people, they are much healthier, because their bodies are getting these foods that they recognize. Corn silk down in the bottom, bright bottom here, corn, the silk off the top, even sweet corn as a tea lowers blood sugar and diabetes. For diabetes, it lowers your blood pressure. Very medicinal if you dry it and just use it in your teas all winter, which they do. And they do sell their blue corn mush. They sell their blue corn, and they're selling different ground corn meal that you can go onto their Facebook page, to the Pawnee Seed Preservation Project Facebook page, and order some. It's amazing. It's really good and very medicinal. Publications, once again, have just been tremendous for us. Here's another Nebraska Land Magazine one done in June of 2010 with them on the cover for a powwow. And then there's a publication that was done in Oklahoma about, and you can see it says saving Pawnee corn one kernel at a time. And that's just how different people find out about us and contact us and want to do things, which is great. In 2018, I was absolutely shocked in October when the Pawnee put on a naming ceremony for me. They surprised me and adopted me into their tribe. My Pawnee name is Adadi Natis Kitty Potsky, which means little corn sister. And for somebody that was never going to grow corn again, this kind of blows me away that I am now called little corn sister to the tribe. And Deb gave me that name. The name came from her as being younger than her and as her little corn sister. So I was the first female ever adopted into the Pawnee Nation, which just blows me away. So what's next? It's a picture of Deb and I last year at the blue corn harvest in eastern Nebraska over by Lincoln. There are some young Pawnee people doing some really great things. This is one of them. He's an archaeologist, Carlton Gover. The first Pawnee to get his PhD in archaeology. So he came up to Nebraska and did some digs and some old village sites, because at first Deb would say that the Pawnee came up, they thought, around 1250. He has been able to date some definite Pawnee village sites back to 900 to 1100 in Nebraska. Definitely Pawnee, not pre-Pawnee. So some really neat work being done that we can learn from now, and we can share. And one of the neat things he said was, I'm going to shut the door. Wash station. My husband's doing housework. I don't want to stop that. From the oral traditions, so the stories told, the songs being told, and even what we're learning from the corn, data can be pulled from that for archaeology. So, and I love what he said, but he said one of the best examples we have of indigenous archaeology happening right now is the seed project that's happening with the corn growing back in Nebraska. Learning from nature and the plants, which is pretty cool. So I showed this to Deb and asked her what else she wanted to put on this, and she said seed ownership is a big thing. So these are her words. The concept of land ownership seemed like a silly concept to tribes. Our mentality was that you can't own land and you can't own seeds, but in today's world, we gotta own our seeds or we'll lose access to them. If we don't own our own seeds, someone can beat us to it and claim them to be theirs. We could be penalized for growing our own seeds. So this is a big push in the Pawnee tribe, is to get these seeds documented. And we're working on that every summer with the interns, documenting, so we can prove that these are unique. Each variety, and we not only have to prove that the ears are unique and the kernels are unique, but the plants are unique and different from the other varieties of plants. So there's a lot of documenting that goes into this, and the interns are a big part of that. For me, one of my goals is to write a new book for the Pawnee. I don't know that it would be published for the public. I doubt it would be published for the public. But here in the background is the Will and Hyde book, Corn Among the Indians of the Upper Missouri, where they describe the corn varieties of the tribes of this region. They made mistakes, and they only worked with the Pawnee varieties for a couple of years, but after 17 years of working with it, we can tell that there are mistakes that are in this book. And why have somebody 50 years from now, if these things aren't written down, we'll try to figure that all out again. So that's my goal, is someday to get all of that put down for the Pawnee, so they have records of documentation of their individual varieties. So how can we help other tribes in the United States explore this regenerative agriculture? I don't know if I can read it behind there. When tribes begin to grow their own seeds, a cultural revitalization naturally occurs. This happens because we are honoring our ancestors. Deb Echohawk quote. And she wants to encourage the self-determination status among tribes. So sovereignty, having your very own seeds gives you sovereignty. Makes you stand out from everybody else. And after everything they lost from being, moved to Oklahoma, this helps them. And I'd finish with my favorite Deb Echohawk quote. She says this all the time: "We never know where the seeds will lead us." And the seeds have led us to a lot of amazing people, and and to a lot of tremendous learning. And it's just really heartwarming to see all of the things when we go back like this and look at this, something like this, to see all of the things that have happened. It's kind of, as it's happening year by year, you don't notice it so much, but when I put this together, then I can see it all in a nutshell, and it really is amazing to see where the seeds have led us. So that's my presentation.
Thanks, Ronnie. Do we want to open it up for anybody have some questions for a few minutes?
Yeah, Ronnie, this is Teresa Pella, and we had some Ponca seed corn that we put in at our farm down in Johnson County, and it did great, but most of the ears were cross-pollinated contamination from field corn. Did you run into any issues like that, and how did you deal with them?
We did early on. Sunflowers help. They help keep pollen from coming in. We also try to make sure the fields or the gardens are 3 miles away from other corn. If you put it in town, it helps a lot, because you have a lot of buildings and a lot of fences and trees. You can find a lot more protected areas to put them in town. Sometimes if you have a hill between or something, that'll help too. Also, oh man, my battery. I just got something that said my battery's running low. Oh, I thought it was plugged in. There. I have also figured out the different maturity dates and pollination dates of each variety. So I have figured out how to stagger 2 crops side by side. And they don't cross by planting them at different times, but you really have to pay attention for a couple of years to figure out when one pollinates and compared to the others. I have corn all around my house, field corn. I don't plant until a month later. The day they plant, I plant a month later.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Ronnie, I'm a former resident of Blue Springs, Nebraska, and then to the north of the Blue Springs Cemetery, and it's been documented as was once a large Earth Lodge Pawnee village. And in there some folks were wondering too, what is the criteria to help set up one of these volunteer gardens and all of that? What is kind of the criteria expectation?
Okay. Well, the first thing you'd want to do is contact myself, usually me, and then I contact Deb and let her know there's someone interested. And where you live and what you know about, like you said, there was a village. Those types of things help a great deal to just get us off on the right path. And the biggest commitment is you don't keep any of the seeds. Everything goes back. Usually somewhere along the line before it's approved, I will have a conversation with you and Deb Echohawk at the same time, because she's the one that approves everybody, not me. So that's pretty much the process. And it's interesting because we don't have a tremendous number of people come forward, because most people don't know what they're doing it in the first place. You know, they wouldn't feel confident enough in doing it. So when somebody does feel confident enough, that's pretty good reason to want to talk to them to see if they may, you know, and then figure out if this is something they still want to do. One thing to realize also is whatever gardener grows, they're going to bear all of the expenses. But as you know, gardening, if you garden, is not a tremendously expensive venture. So, and along the way, I also require all of the gardeners to send me a monthly garden report in the summer, which is neat because then I send it out to everybody and everybody sees how everybody else is doing with their gardens. So that's pretty much it. It's just, you know, Deb has to have the final say and the approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Ronnie, this is a pretty awesome project. It's amazing what you've accomplished. Because we've actually here at UNO, we have done a couple native gardens, and I'm Cherokee, so we've kind of focused more on Cherokee. But then this is not necessarily where they were, but
Right.
where we were. But when you look at varieties, how do you differentiate? Is it like % genetic difference between the varieties, or how is it that you categorize them?
We've done nothing genetic at this point. There's not been a single DNA test done. Did you say UNO?
Yes, yes.
UNO. Okay, awesome. So, are you working with Taylor?
No, it was just kind of the native studies at UNO. And I
Right.
was trying to teach a traditional ecological knowledge kind of native horticulture course. So we had a few native gardens in places we could on campus at an elementary school and Turkey Creek Preserve. But
That's cool. Okay,
it was
so
fun. It was a lot of work though.
it is. Do you know of anywhere that it's a tremendous amount? I have a permanent shoulder injury from growing Pawnee corn. Do you have any documentation of what Cherokee corn, the plants, looked like 100 years ago?
I do not.
Okay.
I might be able to get that sort of information, but I haven't really tried much at this point. But
Yeah, okay, that has helped us a lot. And we just figured this all out in 2017. In 2017, we had 8 varieties, and 4 years later, we have 16. Once we figured this out. And because Will and Hyde were able to document what the plants looked like, how high off the ground the ears were, how tall they were to the top, how many ears on each plant, how many days to maturity. They may have even had how many days pollination in there. I don't remember if they had that. So when we start to pull these different colors out and we start to get the ears to come back like they should look, and they also have pictures in that book taken 100 years ago of all of the ears. So you can kind of compare the ears to each other. So we can tell if the ear is looking like it's supposed to. But I've gotten to the point of where I can go into a garden and I can say, that plant right there looks like the plant is supposed to look. That plant is going to produce an ear like it's supposed to look. And guess what? It does. So I can tell just by looking at a plant if I'm going to produce a good ear. That took a while to get to that, to get to the seed to that point. But if you don't have the documentation of it, if you plant the different varieties and start documenting those types of things like Will and Hyde were, you'll start to see and start pay attention. I also pay close attention to when the corn starts to pollinate. Sometimes you get a little bit pollinating at first, and then you're going to have this period of about 5 days where most of it pollinates. I tend to pay attention to when is that time that most of it pollinated, because that's going to be the time when that true variety is showing up, because it's doing what most of it's supposed to do. Some of it might be at the very beginning. For one variety, it might be in the very first 5 days. You're getting the strongest pollination. And then also on top of that, you have to pay attention to what the ears are looking at at the end as well. So if you have a group that's pollinating super early, separate that group out and document it separately from the next group and maybe the very end group. You may have 3 varieties going on there. And then start pulling those apart from each other each year, and you'll start to see things going on. It takes time, but can't garden twice in a year. We have to wait. So I hope that helped.
Oh, definitely. That's amazing.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
We also had another question in the chat. How long ago did Pawnee evidence go back Nebraska, according to Carlton Gover?
In the talk he gave, he was able to document, I can't remember what that word's called. To the year, between the years 900 and 1100 was the time frame he was able to go back to. And prove that that they were here at that time. Plus the other things that he was finding during the dig would be purely, would lead toward Pawnee arrowheads and things like that. Their specific culture.
So is pollination mostly wind blown, or have you found specific insects that help with pollination?
No, I haven't found any insects that help. I actually battle insects more than anything.
Oh,
Because
really?
we have a lot of insects today that didn't exist at that time, like the corn rootworm and the earworms. Those are the two, the biggest ones. Once in a while, I'll have some little bees in there. There's certain bees that like the pollen, but others don't. So there's this really cool little black bee that goes in there. Looks like a little bumblebee, but it's mostly wind. So because I surround mine with sunflowers, I'm blocking out the wind. So when pollination happens, I'm going through there, I'm shaking, shaking like crazy and helping it out. So you can make wind.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Ronnie, this is Scott. In regards to the sunflowers that you plant, I know the Auricula are noted for their sunflowers. Do you plant a specific variety of sunflowers?
We plant just the Auricula because those are the only ones that we found that we know were from a relative to the Pawnee. And they're really nice because they get about 8 feet tall and get really nice big leaves on them. So they really do a nice job of blocking the wind. So those are the only ones I use. And you can order those from a catalog and from the seed companies. And that's where I got them from originally, because I found those. And ever since then, we haven't had to order because you just keep regenerating the seeds send them down to Oklahoma and they send up some more. So they work very well.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Ronnie? Well, with that, I just want to thank you for your time today. It was a great talk.
Absolutely.
was.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Outstanding.